Fleet Commander Zalthor gazed through the viewport of his command vessel, the inevitable conquest, at the blue-green planet below. Earth, such an unassuming name for such a troublesome world. He drummed his four-fingered hand against the polished obsidian of his command console, his scaled skin catching the light of the ship's artificial suns. 3 months, he muttered to himself. 3 months since their surrender, and yet, the holographic display before him showed the latest reports from the surface. All green indicators, all systems functional, complete compliance from the human population. Perfect. Too perfect. Commander, the High Council is requesting your weekly status update, announced his communications officer. Zalthor waved a dismissive hand. Tell them what they want to hear. Earth remains subdued. The humans continue to accept their place in the glorious Voraxian Empire. Blah, blah, blah. His subordinate's facial tentacles twitched with concern. Sir, that's not exactly protocol. Do I look like I care about protocol, Lieutenant? The High Council wanted Earth conquered. I conquered it. End of story. Except it wasn't. Not really. Zalthor had led 17 planetary conquests in his distinguished career. Not once had a species capitulated so quickly, with so little resistance after the initial clash. The humans had advanced weaponry primitive by Voraxian standards, but still and yet after a few decisive battles, they'd simply given up. Sir, ventured his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vexra, approaching with a datapad. Perhaps you should be pleased. The Empire expected the Earth campaign to last at least 2 cycles. You completed it in less than 1. Your promotion is virtually guaranteed. Zalthor snorted. You know what I think about easy victories, Vexra? That they're usually traps? Exactly. He pulled up the casualty reports from the conflict. Minimal Voraxian losses. Surprisingly low human casualties as well. Their leaders had surrendered before the conflict escalated to global warfare. The humans called it pragmatism. Zalthor called it suspicious. Have you ever seen a predator play dead, Vexra? Lie perfectly still until its hunter comes close enough. Then he mimicked a striking motion with his hand. With respect, Commander, humans aren't apex predators. They're soft, fragile creatures. Our biological surveys confirm they're physically inferior to Voraxians in every measurable way. Zalthor's inner eyelids narrowed. And yet they dominated their planet despite stronger, faster species. They adapted to every environment from desert to Arctic. They survived plagues, world wars, and climate shifts. He turned back to the viewport, staring down at the deceptively peaceful blue world. No, Vexra, something's not right. The humans surrendered too easily. I feel like we're missing something big. 3 months earlier, the skies above Earth had darkened with Voraxian warships. Their sleek, chitinous hulls reflected no light, appearing as perfect voids against the blue atmosphere. Humanity's primitive detection systems had barely registered the fleet's arrival before the first strike. Target their communication infrastructure first, Zalthor had commanded from his war throne. Then their military bases. Minimal civilian casualties. The High Council wants this planet intact. The holographic display before him lit up with thousands of precision strikes. Earth's military scrambled fighter jets, hilariously outdated contraptions that relied on combustion engines and aerodynamics. Zalthor had actually laughed when the first human missiles bounced harmlessly off Voraxian energy shields. Like watching cave dwellers throw rocks at a star cruiser, he'd remarked to his bridge crew. Is this really the species that had our scientists so concerned? Science officer Nelara had been the only one not celebrating. A tall, willowy Voraxian with unusual silver scales, she'd approached his command station with visible apprehension. Commander, I must register a formal caution, she'd said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. My analysis suggests we're underestimating these humans. Zalthor had gestured to the display. Does that look like a species we should fear? Their most advanced weapons can't even scratch our scout ships. It's not their technology that concerns me, Nelara had replied. It's their adaptability. Their historical records show remarkable resilience and creative problem-solving when faced with superior forces. Your concern is noted, science officer, he'd dismissed, but unnecessary. Within 72 Earth hours, the humans' formal military resistance had collapsed. Their leaders had requested terms of surrender, terms that Zalthor, feeling magnanimous in victory, had been uncharacteristically generous with. Let them maintain their local governance, he'd declared to the War Council. Under our supervision, of course. They'll handle their own day-to-day affairs following our directives. It's more efficient than replacing their entire infrastructure. The terms had been signed in a ceremony broadcast worldwide. The human leaders had appeared somber but composed. No tears, no begging, just quiet acceptance. At the time, Zalthor had interpreted this as appropriate deference to superior beings. Earth is now officially the newest protectorate of the Voraxian Empire, the High Council representative had announced via quantum transmission. Fleet Commander Zalthor, in recognition of your swift and efficient conquest, you are hereby appointed planetary governor of Earth, effective immediately. There had been congratulations, promotions for his officers, and celebrations throughout the fleet. All except Nalara, who had simply nodded when he'd informed her she would remain on his staff as chief scientific advisor. I hope I'm wrong about them, Commander, she'd said, her massive eyes blinking slowly. For all our sakes. Looking back now from his command vessel orbiting a seemingly pacified Earth, Zalthor was beginning to think she hadn't been wrong at all. Present day. Zalthor stomped through the corridor of the Earth Governance Complex, formerly the United Nations headquarters in New York, muttering curses in 17 different Voraxian dialects. Behind him, 2 junior officers struggled to keep pace, their data tablets chiming with incoming reports. That's the 4th atmospheric processor to fail this week, Zalthor growled. And now the quantum communication relay in the southern hemisphere is offline. Again? Yes, Governor, replied the braver of the 2 officers. Technicians report finding evidence of power surges in both systems. Power surges. How convenient. Zalthor stopped abruptly, causing both officers to nearly collide with him. And I suppose the transport shuttle that crashed yesterday also experienced a power surge. The officers exchanged nervous glances. The investigation is still ongoing, sir. Zalthor resumed walking. Get me Security Chief Drovak. Now. 10 minutes later, Drovak's massive frame filled the doorway to Zalthor's office. A veteran of 3 planetary conquests, Drovak had a reputation for ruthless efficiency and absolute loyalty to the Empire. You summoned me, Governor? Drovak's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Zalthor gestured to the holographic display showing a map of Earth with red indicators highlighting system failures across the globe. Explain this. Drovak barely glanced at it. Equipment malfunction, sir. This planet's atmosphere is more corrosive than our initial surveys indicated. The moisture alone is wreaking havoc on our systems. All at once? Across 6 continents? That's quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say? Drovak's facial plates shifted in what passed for a Voraxian shrug. With respect, Governor, you're seeing patterns where none exist. The humans are compliant. Our peacekeeping forces report minimal resistance. And what about the reports of increasing behavioral issues among our troops? 3 separate incidents of soldiers picking fights with their commanding officers this week alone. Adaptation stress, Drovak dismissed. Many of our forces haven't served on a water world before. The constant humidity, the gravity variations, it affects judgment. I've increased recreation rotations to compensate. Zalthor leaned forward. And you don't think the humans might be involved somehow? The humans? Drovak actually laughed, a harsh barking sound. Governor, they're barely managing to adapt to our presence. Half their former nations are still struggling to implement our resource quotas. They're too busy surviving to plot anything. A chime interrupted them, Zalthor's communication implant. He raised a hand to the side of his head. Governor Zalthor here. Sir, came a panicked voice. We have a situation at the North American Water Purification Station. 10 minutes later, Zalthor and Drovak stood watching in disbelief as dozens of elite Voraxian soldiers flailed about, their normally intimidating armor suits performing what could only be described as an uncoordinated dance routine. Their limbs jerked spasmodically, helmets flashing in rainbow patterns, while the embedded speakers blasted what humans apparently called disco music. "Make it stop," bellowed the squadron commander as his troops spun and gyrated involuntarily. Nearby, a group of human workers observed with expressions of perfect innocence, though Zalthor couldn't help noticing one quickly covering her mouth. "System virus," reported the frantic technician trying to remedy the situation. "It's overridden the neural interface controls. We've never seen anything like it." Drovak's face had turned a mottled purple, a sign of extreme embarrassment in Voraxians. He turned to Zalthor, who was fighting to maintain his own composure. "A coincidence, Security Chief?" Zalthor asked, eyebrow ridge raised, as a particularly unfortunate soldier's suit forced him into a perfect split. "Or perhaps we should reconsider how compliant these humans really are. No more delegating," Zalthor announced as he strode into Science Officer Nellara's laboratory. "We're handling this investigation personally." Nellara looked up from her analysis station, multiple holographic displays surrounding her. "Finally convinced something's wrong, Governor? When I have elite soldiers performing the hustle in front of human workers? Yes, I'd say something is definitely wrong." Zalthor approached her workstation. "What have you found?" Nellara's displays shifted to show microscopic images. "These are from the malfunctioning atmospheric processor. See these tiny scratches on the quantum circuit pathways?" Zalthor leaned closer. "Sabotage?" "Yes, but not with advanced tools. These were made with, well, essentially sandpaper." Nellara sounded almost impressed. "They've been using abrasives to gradually damage our tech. So subtle our diagnostic systems registered it as normal wear." "Sandpaper," Zalthor repeated flatly. "We have ships that can travel between stars, weapons that can level mountains, and we're being defeated by sandpaper? That's just one example. The communications relay failure? Someone poured a sugary liquid into the cooling system." She pulled up another image. "The humans call it soda, simple carbonated sugar water, dried into a sticky residue that conducted electricity exactly where it shouldn't." Zalthor's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. "But our security protocols are looking for advanced sabotage methods," Nellara finished. "Not primitive solutions that no spacefaring civilization would consider. The humans are using their technological limitations as an advantage." Over the next week, their covert investigation revealed a pattern so ingenious Zalthor couldn't decide whether to be furious or impressed. Humans had been categorizing Voraxian technology not by function, but by vulnerability. They'd been systematically testing different methods of disruption, documenting results, and sharing their findings through seemingly innocuous channels. "Look at this," Nellara said, displaying what appeared to be human entertainment content. "These memes they share contain coded instructions for sabotage techniques." Zalthor studied the image of a small furry animal with text about spicy water and electronics. "So while they smile and bow to our faces, they're learning everything about us," Nellara confirmed. "Our biology, our technology, our behavioral patterns. They're particularly interested in our environmental sensitivities." "And the behavioral issues among our troops?" Nellara hesitated. "They've been introducing compounds into the base water supplies. Nothing immediately harmful, but they affect Voraxian neurochemistry over time. Increased aggression, decreased rational thinking." "By the void," Zalthor whispered. "They're not just resisting occupation, they're waging full psychological warfare." Their breakthrough came when they discovered a hidden pattern in the maintenance request system. Certain work orders, when mapped across time and location, revealed a coordinated effort to test Voraxian response protocols. Each incident provided humans with more data about how the occupiers thought and reacted. Zalthor stared at the completed pattern, a cold realization settling over him. They never intended to surrender permanently. Nellara nodded gravely. The humans only surrendered to buy time, to study us up close. Every concession we thought we were generously granting them was actually giving them exactly what they needed. Zalthor finished. This wasn't a conquest. It was a trap. And we walked right into it. The human diplomatic quarters had been designed to project Voraxian dominance, towering ceilings, stark metallic surfaces, and gravity adjusted to be slightly uncomfortable for Earth physiology. None of this seemed to bother Ambassador Marcus Wells as he calmly poured himself a cup of steaming liquid. "Tea, Governor Zalthor?" he offered with a pleasant smile. "It's a human custom when beginning difficult conversations." Zalthor remained standing, 4 armed guards positioned behind him. "This isn't a social call, Ambassador Wells. We know what your people have been doing." "HM. And what exactly would that be?" Wells took a sip, perfectly composed. "Systematic sabotage. Psychological warfare. Studying our weaknesses." Zalthor slammed a data tablet onto the table, displaying evidence of human interference. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" Wells set down his cup. "Actually, Governor, we were counting on you noticing eventually. Though I must say, it took you longer than we expected. 3 months? We had a betting pool going. I lost 20 credits. The casual admission stunned Zalthor, momentarily speechless. Wells continued, "You're wondering why I'm not denying it. Simple. We've reached the next phase of operations." He glanced at his watch. Right about now, as if on cue, Zalthor's communication implant buzzed with an emergency alert. He ignored it, keeping his eyes fixed on the human. "You've made a serious miscalculation," Zalthor growled. "Your primitive sabotage techniques are an annoyance, nothing more. And I can end with a single order." Wells laughed. "Primitive? That's exactly what we wanted you to think." He leaned forward. "Tell me, has your medical team reported an uptick in respiratory issues among your troops? Skin irritations? Digestive problems?" A chill ran through Zalthor. Those reports had just crossed his desk that morning. Earth is home to approximately 1 trillion species of microorganisms, Wells continued conversationally. Bacteria, fungi, viruses. Most are harmless. But we've had thousands of years to study which ones aren't harmless, which ones can be enhanced. He reached into his pocket. Zalthor's guards instantly raised their weapons, but Wells slowly withdrew a small vial of clear liquid. "This contains a modified strain of bacteria commonly found in human gut flora, completely benign to us." He set it carefully on the table. "To Voraxians, however, it causes an interesting reaction when it contacts your skin membranes. Care for a demonstration?" "You're weaponizing bacteria against us," Zalthor realized, fighting to maintain his composure. "We're using what we have," Wells corrected. "Just like the Maori used their knowledge of terrain against British colonizers. Like the Vietnamese used tunnel networks against American forces. Humans have quite a history of defeating technologically superior invaders." Wells touched a concealed control on his watch. The wall behind him transformed into a display showing a global network of human resistance cells, communication patterns, and sabotage operations. The scale was staggering, thousands of interconnected groups across every continent. "This is just what we're allowing you to see," Wells said. "A courtesy, professionally speaking." Zalthor's communication implant was now buzzing continuously with emergency alerts. Finally, he answered, "What is it?" "Governor," came Nullara's panicked voice, "our ship's navigation systems are all showing critical failures. Something has corrupted the Central Command network. We're locked out of our own fleet." Wells smiled pleasantly. "Ah, right on schedule. You see, Governor, while you were focused on our primitive physical sabotage, our best hackers were reverse engineering your computer systems. We've been inside your network for weeks." He stood, straightening his jacket. "Now then, shall we discuss new surrender terms?" "Yours. To be specific." Zalthor watched from the command center as the Voraxian reinforcement fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere. 12 battle cruisers, the Empire's finest. Surely this would turn the tide back in their favor. Deployment complete, Governor, reported the tactical officer. 5,000 elite troops now on the ground. Good, Zalthor nodded. Have them secure the major human population centers first. Full containment protocols. 3 hours later, the reports began. First a few scattered cases, then dozens, then hundreds. Voraxian soldiers collapsing, their respiratory systems failing, skin membranes erupting in painful lesions. How? Drovak demanded, his usual confidence shattered. They're using completely sealed environmental suits. Nellara's voice was grim over the communication channel. The humans aerosolized the bacteria. It's in the air now, attaching to the external surfaces of our equipment. When the troops perform standard decontamination, they're actually activating the bacteria and bringing it inside their suits. Outside, across the globe, the human resistance had emerged from hiding. Not in traditional military formations, but in unpredictable, irregular patterns. One moment, a street would be clear. The next, civilian vehicles would transform into makeshift barricades. Building facades would collapse to reveal hidden artillery positions. Ordinary citizens would suddenly coordinate with military precision. They're using something called flash mob tactics, explained a bewildered intelligence officer. Assembling, striking, and dispersing before we can respond. Our combat algorithms can't predict their movements because there's no logic to them. Zalthor had studied human military history during the initial conquest. He now recognized elements of every asymmetric warfare strategy humans had ever employed, blended together in a chaotic but effective hybrid that defied conventional responses. Voraxian troops, trained to follow strict protocols, were paralyzed by the constant need to improvise. Then came the technological collapse. Weapons systems targeting their own users, communication networks broadcasting private Voraxian communications worldwide, transport ships flying themselves into the ocean. The infiltration was complete and devastating. Governor, we've lost contact with the orbital fleet, a communications officer reported, panic evident in his voice. The humans have somehow transmitted the virus to our ship systems. They're piloting themselves out of orbit. Zalthor watched the tactical display as his carefully constructed occupation disintegrated. The arrogance of the Voraxian Empire had been their undoing. They had expected to fight human technology, but instead faced human ingenuity, an enemy they hadn't bothered to understand. Sir, Nellara's voice came through his private channel, unusually subdued. I've completed my analysis. The humans began planning this counterattack before we even arrived. The surrender, the compliance, the apparent defeat, it was all engineered to give them time to prepare. This isn't a resistance. What is it then? Zalthor asked, already knowing the answer. An extermination, she replied. Ours. The Voraxian Command Center, once a monument to alien superiority, now resembled a besieged fortress. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as the few remaining functional systems sputtered and sparked. Outside, the perimeter defenses were failing one by one. We've lost the eastern quadrant, reported one of the few officers still capable of fighting. Estimated human forces numbering in the thousands. They're using our own weapons against us. Zalthor stood at the tactical display, watching the methodical collapse of everything he had built. 3/4 of his forces were incapacitated by the bacterial weapon. The rest were scattered, cut off from command, fighting their own equipment as often as the humans. The main doors slid open. Ambassador Wells strode in, flanked by human soldiers wearing modified Voraxian armor. Somehow, the diplomatic niceties had been maintained. They hadn't simply killed Zalthor when they had the chance. Governor, Wells greeted him, as casually as if they were meeting for one of their regular briefings. I believe it's time to discuss terms. Zalthor laughed bitterly. Terms? Just as we offered you terms 3 months ago? How poetic. We're not without mercy, Wells replied, placing a data tablet on the command console. Unconditional withdrawal of all Voraxian forces from Earth. Return of all human prisoners. Reparations to be determined later. And if we refuse? Wells gestured to a technician, who activated a holographic display. This is a live feed of your homeworld's defense network. We've been using your own quantum communication relays to deliver our virus directly to Voraxian Prime. Their systems are as compromised as yours. Zalthor stared in disbelief. Impossible. The distance alone. Distance is irrelevant in quantum communications, Wells said. You taught us that technology, remember? Everything you gave us, we studied. Everything you showed us, we improved upon. Against all his training, against the core of Voraxian military doctrine, Zalthor felt something unfamiliar, respect for an enemy. These humans, with their fragile bodies and primitive technology, had outsmarted the most powerful empire in the known galaxy. If I agree to your terms, Zalthor said slowly, what guarantee do I have that you won't simply destroy us anyway? Wells smiled. None whatsoever. Just as we had none from you. That's where trust begins, isn't it? Zalthor looked around at his defeated command center, then back to the human. With a resigned sigh, he reached for the data tablet. 1 month later, Zalthor stood on the observation deck of the last Voraxian vessel, preparing to leave Earth orbit. Below, the blue planet seemed peaceful, giving no indication of the humiliating defeat it had dealt to the mighty Voraxian Empire. The withdrawal had been orderly but hurried. Humans had maintained a surprising level of professional courtesy during the process, even helping treat Voraxian soldiers suffering from bacterial exposure. Such mercy was unknown in the Empire's military doctrine. It was confusing. Final preparations complete, Commander, said Nalara, now restored to her original rank after Zalthor's demotion. The humans have cleared us for departure. Commander, no longer Governor, no longer Fleet Commander. The High Council had made their displeasure abundantly clear. Tell me, Nalara, Zalthor said quietly, where did we go wrong? She considered this carefully. We studied their weapons, their technology, their resources. We assumed those defined their capabilities. A pause. We failed to study their history, their resilience, their adaptability, their deviousness, Zalthor added with a grim smile. A communication alert sounded. Ambassador Wells' face appeared on the screen. Commander Zalthor. A final courtesy call before your departure. Ambassador. Zalthor acknowledged with a stiff nod. Come to gloat. Not at all, Wells replied. I wanted to thank you personally. Thank me? For what? For being so predictable. Wells smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it now. When our deep space telescopes detected your fleet 2 years ago, we needed a strategy. Conventional warfare was clearly impossible. The realization dawned on Zalthor. You knew we were coming before we arrived? The surrender was planned from the beginning? Of course. I was appointed Earth Defense Coordinator the day we spotted your fleet. We studied everything we could observe about your ships, your patterns. We prepared the surrender strategy, the resistance network, everything. Wells leaned closer to the screen. You gave us exactly what we needed, close access to your technology and biology. On a screen behind Wells, Zalthor could see humans in modified Voraxian armor boarding what appeared to be a repurposed Voraxian scout ship. You're not just defending, Zalthor realized. You're preparing to expand. Let's call it a preemptive security measure, Wells replied. We're sending diplomatic teams to your neighboring systems to explain the new situation. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Zalthor staring at his own reflection in the dark screen. 3 days later, standing before the Voraxian High Council, Zalthor broke every protocol of military reporting. He spoke without formal permission, interrupted the High Councilor's questions, and displayed an alarming lack of proper deference. You're not listening, he finally shouted, his patience exhausted. The humans aren't just another species we failed to conquer. They're unlike anything we've encountered. They are primitives with primitive technology, dismissed the High Councilor. They are adaptable, Zalthor countered. When they can't outfight you, they outsmart you. When they can't match your technology, they find its weaknesses. And now he paused, letting his words sink in. Now they have our technology too. The council chamber fell silent. You asked about the resources required to mount another invasion, Zalthor continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You should be asking about the resources required to defend ourselves when they come for us. Because they will come. Above Earth, invisible to Voraxian long-range sensors, the first fleet of human ships, built with reverse-engineered Voraxian technology, prepared to enter faster than light travel. Humanity was going to the stars. And they were bringing with them the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, the ability to be underestimated.